Well, I just want to officially welcome everyone to this call. We are coming together around the topic of interdependence, and specifically around land-based lives and hand-built homes. And yeah, I'm excited to be here today with y'all, as well as a dear friend and community member, Rachel. And yeah, we're excited to have a conversation in which we are speaking from our experiences on this land, but maybe from some perspectives and voices of people we know have also been like seeding their perspectives and contributions to the experiment called Earthaven in the village here, and wanting to hear from you all as well. And yeah, the thought is to open up with some of the questions we had in the invitation that you all got to have invited you here today, and then just see where we go with your questions, shaping that direction we go in if they're there. And as always, Rachel and I can talk more than an hour and a half, so it's not like we'll run out of things to say probably. So yeah, please do. We'll be more diligent about checking the chat today and informing this conversation based on your interest. So with that, I want to say hello, Rachel.
Hi, NikiAnne.
Yeah. I want to see if you would be willing to start us off with a question that's driving for you, or I can ask the question that's on my heart, and then if you wanted to answer.
Yeah, the question that's driving for me or for you. Well, I really love this first question that we came up with together for the description of this class. And why are responsibility and creativity intrinsically intertwined when it comes to a land-based life? Responsibility, creativity, land-based life. What's the meat of that for you?
All right. See what comes through. Yeah, I think for me, it's going to like deconstructing each of those words, which I like to do. So I think of responsibility as the ability to respond, and creativity as the tendency to create or to make. And for me, that's like so fascinating and juicy to ground that in the land-based life, which, I would say that the land-based life could be even in suburbia and even in urban settings. It's like an orientation to a place. It's not like it has to be rural or it has to be a farm. So I really want to take that like maybe loaded term and like open it up to be like whatever one's relationship is to land and place. So I think of the intersection of those as like, wow, us as humans have this ability to respond to our context, to our place, to our ecosystem, this place that we're living in that's been created, that's been birthed, it exists. And so creation is like all around us, and it's not like, it's living. And so for it to keep evolving and continuing to be created over and over and keep birthing into new cycles of life, it's like calling us to task, to attune and to pay attention and then respond accordingly. So like for me, it's this, the responsibility is this relationship of attunement and acting with appropriate response to the context at hand. So it's like embedded in that is relationality and reciprocity, imagination. Yeah, that's some of what comes through for me.
Yeah, like there's not like a set prescription for living a land-based life, right? Like it's different wherever you are and that particular piece of land. And so the creativity and how to the responsibility, like to observe, like what is happening here on this piece of land and how do I live with it? How do I enhance it? Like, how do I make it healthier or more diverse? Or how do I harness the energy from it in a way that's like not harmful? Or, yeah, like the responsibility, like I love how you broke that down and you're like, oh, the ability to respond. But then I also like in that traditional way that we use responsibility, like the responsibility of relationship and reciprocity, like with non-human entities, right? And the other beings of the earth. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And
That my first introduction to land-based living was actually when I was in my mid-20s, living in pretty much downtown Chattanooga, just right outside downtown in a neighborhood. And my closest friend and her partner lived next door, and I moved into a little apartment with them. And I had my mind blown by what was possible in just being in relationship with the land on even like maybe an eighth of an acre plot in the city. Yeah, it was just really astounding. And maybe I could share examples of that later. But this land-based living doesn't mean like homesteading and farming and big swaths of land in rural or wilderness America. Like, yeah, it's anywhere you happen to be and can access land.
yeah, and I just saw that Gururam threw in the mix stewardship, like thinking into the future. And
Mm,
yeah, I think of this response, the our relationship to responsibility is like a claiming of our power.
mhm,
Like we are claiming that our place in relationship, and I mean, we, belonging was one of the specific topics we went into under this umbrella of interdependence. And I think responsibility is deeply connected with belonging. Like it puts
mhm,
this empowered position to engage and have influence in this way that is, again, contextual, from a place of attunement and listening. So it's interesting because I think that there's actually this, I don't know what it is, a trend, a phenomenon that's happening of like people not wanting to take responsibility, like claiming it. Like, I don't want to be responsible for that. And like
mm.
shying away from responsibility as if then it like life's better or something, or it's like this. And I have like, there's a big like ding, 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 like hazard in that yes, I guess I'm scared for that to be normalized in as these next generation of youth come up to be our leaders, and like feeling that us as adults are scared to ask them to take responsibility for
Mm.
things in our homes, for things in our communities, in our villages, because it's a skill. It's like it's a relationship of practice in responsiveness. And so if we don't have, if any of us, young, old, are like stepping out of that practice, um, I think we're going to get more of those things we're saying we don't want in life.
Mhm. Well, I mean, I think that we're seeing that happening already, the people stepping out of responsibility, and it's maybe why we are where we are, and we're trying to remember, relearn, re-village, all of these things, right? Um, yeah, and like it's our birth, that responsibility is our birthright. We were born into it and we carry it whether we want it or not. And I'm a firm believer in like you waste a lot of energy resisting reality.
I mean, and this like we ask ourselves, like, do we have the ability to do something? Do we have the capacity? Do we have the capability? Like it's, we talk about it's, it's actually there's some relationship. I'm like hazardous or like cautious to say this because I don't know exactly like all that's involved with this relationship with our ableness, but and our ability. But there's
Mm.
something for me of like when I'm taking responsibility, which means that I'm able to respond, like I'm claiming that I'm living from wellness. And like that feels like a radical act to me.
Or you give yourself I don't know if I understand maybe that statement totally because my response, what I was trying to say was like, or at least you're giving yourself an opportunity to live from wellness.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
To,
Yeah.
to test my limitations and to practice and yeah, be humbled and yeah, right, right. Mhm.
Yeah, but the like, how can we actually really have wellness if we're not in relationship with the things? And like, Guénon used the word stewardship. And I rarely use that word, even though it's synonymous with the word that I like,
Mhm.
which is like, I'm tending,
Mhm.
I'm tending these things. And tending the things puts me in relationship to the things. And it doesn't, it decenters me and my desires so much, right? Like definitely like, as a farmer, I am exerting a certain level of will over the land,
Mhm.
but I'm
Mhm.
also tending the land. And
You're
so I
responsive to its needs or its requests. You're being responsive to its needs and requests.
exactly. Yeah, I'm being responsive to
Mhm.
it needs and requests, like the land itself, the soil itself, the diversity, the plant health, the health of the riparian zone and the creek that runs alongside of it. Like those are my first concerns. And then like my desires for what I want to do with the land or what can be done with the land that supports its health, like those things come second, right?
Mhm.
And I think that is very clearly like an answer to that question that was posed of like the responsibility and the creativity. Like, oh, I have this certain set of circumstances. Now there's the land has these needs, I have these needs, and now I get to be creative about how to meet all of these needs.
Yeah. And to ground that a little bit in our experiment of Earthaven, the mandate that our predecessors took on was to carve a village out of a forest.
Yep.
So, there's not a lot of preservation happening there. There's a lot of um, ask of creativity to like in those acts of creation of a village, of a human settlement amidst a forested landscape, to do that in responsible ways. And so that's another relationship for me of how it's grounded in this land-based experiment is um, like there's a chance for remediation of what happened before. So like Earthaven, it was cleared. It was clear cut 100 years ago. It was not tended in a way that people today might call regenerative or ecologically minded. Um, and it had those people then were in deep relationship with that land, I imagine. So I guess it's like I'm like trying to like walk that line of tension between um, intention and impact too. It's like we might have the best intentions for our eco village for this experiment, and um, time will tell how that plays out. And someone in our village likes to say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. To be an intentional community is a really interesting situation. So yeah, and that we're because in a moment in time we're working with our capacities and our resources and the desires and needs of a moment and how much that evolves and shifts through time that proves, oh, that was a good idea at the time. I mean, that's all over Earthaven. Seemed like a good idea at the time. So anyway,
Right.
just that there's not like an inherent good outcome or like good, whatever that means, like positive outcome with this, expressions of responsibility and creativity. Like it's
And good intentions, right? Good intentions do
yeah,
not always have a net positive outcome.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I told you, I'm like, I can't help but talk about this, but that's what it pings for me is the staying.
Hmm.
Like when you're talking about like, yeah, they bought this damaged swath, like giant piece of land, like, over 300 acres. Um, and I have this thought of like, how do they even know where to begin? I'm managing like 5 acres of that 300 and something acres right now. And I have that feeling of like, so many fronts, so many options, like, gotta have a plan. And that was the thing, right? Is like sitting, staying, observing the land long enough to know it really well before you do anything, move slow at a manageable level so you don't make mistakes that you can't take back later. If we cut a large tree, like that's 100 years, or 70 years of tree that we
Mhm.
just lost. So like, let's make some intentional choices. Um, but it's and the only opportunity you get to remediate your mistakes are if you stay. And if
Yeah.
you do not walk away from them, and if you live with those mistakes. And I think that's a really radical part of the experiment that we're doing here on all levels, whether it is the land-based level or the culture or the social structure, which I mean, all of those are tied to the land-based living, right?
Mhm.
Um, but staying in one place for like maybe the majority of a human lifetime,
Mhm.
that is radical at this point in time where we are global and we are consistently migratory and we have so many options,
Mhm.
that we commit, um, to tending, and in that we commit to staying, we commit to fixing whatever mistakes we've made in the past, which is like kind of where we are in Earth Haven right now. Like I feel like we've learned a lot of new things and we are going forward into the future, doing things a little bit differently, less idealistic, but with more knowledge of consequences. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, sort of like informing the choices that we make. And if we had not stayed here in this place to live with the impact of our actions, like that is not how we would move forward. And what I see happening in culture is like we just move to a different place and then we do the same thing or something different over there and not live, um yeah, with the impact of our actions.
I mean, may it be so that we're learning and adjusting. I mean, I find myself still playing out some of my little girl fantasies, or I see some of our other people in, other beloved villagers having that youthful need to like do it themselves and like this is what I want to learn it. And like
Mm,
I think there is a tension of
mhm.
some of us in the village not learning from our predecessors and the experiments that have already happened in the village. And I do have a hope and a prayer that we humble ourselves a little bit without squandering creativity,
Mhm.
but
And are you
that we are learning from the others and that we're not um yeah, I think I want to like there's a piece in here like I feel like we're sometimes acting from our unchecked privilege, that we have the wealth to screw up 3 times more. And I'm like,
Mhm.
and like I think the question is like, well, do we have that time? Are we really
Mm,
that wealthy to keep not
mhm.
learning from the mistakes of others
Mhm.
and those around us and our own? Like that
Mhm.
feels like this tension.
And I'm wondering maybe if you're speaking maybe specifically to our homes and how we're building them here. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I just like yeah, this is a hot topic. This
Well, let
this
me
is
just
a
ask the
good one
question to
though.
you.
And and I know like a lot of people are really interested in naturally built homes and hand built homes. And they're really wonderful in a lot of climates and a lot of places. Um, and in this valley, we have a certain set of circumstances that make these like breathable, natural homes problematic. And yeah, I also see that. And this is the thing about being an intentional community and not a village, right? Is we do it's this topic could just mushroom out everywhere because there's like the social construct of we're still taking new people in to this culture, and because human lives are so short, we have to move at a certain pace to like get them in here and get them integrated and get them housed and like so they can support their family and whatever. But it's not enough time for like apprenticeship really and learning. And it's like, yeah, someone who wants to build a natural home right now, like I wish they'd come talk to me. You know,
Say
like
more.
I
Yeah.
live in one of those early experimental, naturally built homes at Earthaven. It's the only entire straw bale building I think we have at Earthaven. One home has maybe partial straw bale, and the council hall has some straw bale wings. Um, and in my neighborhood are some of the other oldest homes in Earthaven, not straw bale, like built in many different ways and many different styles. And and even some of the best built homes here who like took into account our climate are still struggling with things like mold, right? We live in a forest. We live in a temperate rainforest. Like there's a lot of moisture here. There's a lot of humidity here. And when your home is breathing, all that means is that humidity is moving through it and around it at all times. Um, and so it makes perfect sense to me. And I am a person who likes to learn from other people's mistakes. I prefer that. Not always. Sometimes I have to stumble in blind and do it myself, but I think I'm growing out of that a little bit. But
Yeah.
like I've been thinking honestly, like in the next 10 to 15 years, I may actually be the first person to tear down a home in Earthaven, right?
Ooh, I haven't even heard this. This is
I
cool.
mean, it's a really edgy thing to do because I also value history and cultural topsoil, and I love the old things with a story and you know, but I don't want I don't want to live there for the rest of my life the way it is, and I don't want to hand off what I think is a problem to
Mhm.
someone else.
Mhm.
And I learned that by living there. I naively and maybe kind of not too innocently, but took on this home, and it's not functional. And it requires a lot of work for it to stay healthy in the summertime. Um, and I want to put my energy elsewhere. Uh, yeah. And so I totally see the sense in the evolution of what we talk about as natural building at Earthaven, that we are doing conscientious building, right? And we're still looking at the sources of our materials. We can source a lot of wood from this land in which to stick frame our homes with, um, but also looking at like energy efficiency. And I really have let go of like the romantic idea. Like I mean, that was kind of my dream, and maybe why my home was attractive to me was to
Mhm.
build a straw bale home or a cob home or something like that. And I love their aesthetic, and I
Mhm.
love the aesthetic of my home,
Mhm.
but it's not functional and it's not healthy, and it feels like something to learn from and move forward from. And I would not want people repeating that,
Mhm. Well, this
actually.
is a great dovetail with this question that Rachel's asking in the thread. Um, how have we seen sustainable living in land-based home practices change over the years?
Yeah.
And I think that there's many answers to that question. And I admit that I'm um, living in a pretty unique situation at Earthaven that's very privileged, and very conscientious. And so just to say that I'm coming from that lens, knowingly. And I think there's another question that's got popped up is, how inevitable is mold? Yeah, in straw bales in the wet environment. I would say a couple of things to this question. So one, just to ground ourselves in space, we're in Southern Appalachian Mountains, Blue Ridge Mountain specifically, um, a subtropical rainforest. And there's microclimates in the Western North Carolina. We happen to be one of the wetter ones.
Hmm.
Asheville gets 50% less rain than us at
Hmm.
Earthaven. That's huge.
Hmm.
To be a community that decided to be off grid out the gate, um, it created an impediment and maybe a challenge to honor one of those permaculture principles of start on a small scaled front. The village couldn't start on a small scale front. It hit the ground running as a forest, carving a village out. So there was no housing, there was no water, there was no electricity. And so some people lived in town in Asheville, and they would come out on the weekends to invest in Earthaven. There was some really hardy folks, like a handful of them, who were living in tents year round with no running water and like makeshift camp kitchens. I mean, they were literally camping and building a village. Super intense conditions. A lot of like pioneering energy. And yeah, that like, again, that pioneering, that like thistly, like break the ground up energy, like just hardy characters. And so, but they were in it together. And so fast forward through time a little bit when they're actually with some installation of infrastructure, some water, and they've cleared trees, and they're having cleared ground and lumber yards going on, like being created, and then building the council hall and some of those first buildings that Rachel's referring to in the hamlet, out of wood from the land, and really with this commitment to experiment, and being what someone in our village calls overeducated suburban refugees. Well-educated people not from that place, who were well-intended and who didn't have the right skills for the tasks at hand. Fine, it's okay. That's just like a part of the experiment. That was this journey for this place, this village, that generation of people at Earthaven. So those, I mentioned off the grid to begin with because as they were installing their first systems for electricity, they were very basic solar systems, one for each house. So imagine Rachel, if she was here, whatever, at Earthaven, 28 years ago, and I was here, and Debbie's here, and Chris Farmer's here, and Brandon and Darren and Paul and whomever, Molly. We're all living in our own little tent or hut, and then we're all installing our own little solar system. And then so I'm responsible for my solar system. I don't know anything about solar systems. I am going to like ruin it pretty fast by not watering the batteries and da 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 da. Anyway, point being, people were living very minimally, and it was costly. It is costly to do an off-grid electrical system. Like, for those who live in the Southeast, like you pay Duke $50 or $100 or $200 for your activation fee, and then you just pay what you use. Like when you put a solar system in, you're paying, $5, $10, $20,000 for something very basic. So that there's a cost prohibitiveness to the investment of infrastructure out the gate. And so that means that people were installing systems just strong enough to like power a light and a computer, charge a computer, like not even a refrigerator, and definitely not an air conditioning system. And that feels like the key thing to say here is in the Southeast, where it is high temperatures and high humidity, that's the combo. And most people don't think of air conditioners as dehumidifiers, but that's what they are. And that's what's made a lot of the ways we live in the Southeast really livable for our modern lifestyles. And so to not have that in a lot of that first generation of Earthaven is creating this living conditions that Rachel's referring to. And she described hers, but like there's that times whatever, 15, 20, 25. So yes, that still exists. Yes, people are managing with that. And there have been upgrades to electrical systems in neighborhoods. So like the hamlet has a microgrid. Something you can learn about very easily at Earthaven, through Earthaven. There's also a write-up in Home Power magazine about this microgrid in Rachel's neighborhood that was written by Chris Farmer, and it's accessible online. But to say that is the like 2.0 version in my mind of that three-legged stool of sustainability, the ecological, the social, and the economic, those three legs coming together. It's like, how can this neighborhood pool their resources in a very effective way? Let's just say it was $5,000 per person, and they got 10 times the amount of power they were living with, and someone else is managing it. And they have ideally a weighted metering system. So, you know, I can blow dry my hair when I don't want to go outside with wet hair. And Rachel doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, NikiAnne, that's a terrible choice. It was cloudy yesterday and our batteries aren't full. Like, you know, so she takes tension off of our relationship by having like a well thought through system on a shared level. Like that's like kind of what we're going into as far as the next generation of Earthaven is like that kind of lessons learned. So to dovetail that back a little bit to housing, and I know this is a long answer. Thanks so much for hanging with me. I think that there are people building in the valley and in the village that are not letting their ideals get in the way of their ideals. So yes, people want to live in ways and build with materials that are less detrimental to the earth. And if we use that triangle of that cheap, fast, good, cheap, fast, quality, so those are three? Yeah, I think so. That you can only have two at a time, let's say. And so each person is living a value-driven life based on principles. And we're going to come up with different expressions because we have a different prioritization to those values and different access to resources and different life demands, creating timeline necessities and different needs. And so this relationship to sustainable and ecological is a shared concept, and it becomes quite personal in its expression. And that's where I'd say that Earthaven has a lot of wiggle room in that. We don't have building code demands put on anyone. And so it really is asking someone to rise to the occasion of their own volition, to be responsive to the world, humble, you know, tracking down the information needed to like do it better than it was before, so that that person and that family is making a wise investment that actually stands through time more. And so yes, there still are what we might traditionally call natural buildings happening or green buildings, or but it's kind of a like opened up in it's more inclusive. So it is more honoring of like, yes, wood is natural. Stud frame buildings built out of wood, even milled into 2x4s or 2x6s, is natural. And so it's getting out of the dogma a little bit. And yes, it perhaps changes some of that aesthetic of like round for those who are building rectangular or square buildings. And there's pros and cons to that. And so it's, you know, it's anyway, I could say more and I could say more about my house, but I just want to make space. Thanks for hearing that big chunk of like linking some pieces through time. I don't know if you want to add anything, Rachel, or if
No, I mean, I was curious about what other topics that people might like to hear about. I mean, these aspects of you touched on one is like the shared infrastructure piece and like the microgrid that we have in the hamlet. And I think like moving forward, like that there's a key there, and that is like there's more like cooperation, because there's also something else that comes with that pioneering spirit, right? And that pioneering spirit that's like really driven and like ideal driven is often extremely independent in nature. Because I mean, I have asked the question of like, yeah, why 5 million different little huts with their own solar systems? Like, no one had the bright idea of like any sort of simple co-housing situation and pooling the resources. But that is an evolution in our culture, right? That's an evolution in humanity right now. It's coming back to like a collective way of being. And those people just had to like get themselves here first, right? To learn those lessons. But I mean, that's like, you know, I think the leading front now is now we're all here and we live here and we have the ability to like think things through, think about the collective, plan a little bit better. So yeah, we have microgrids and we have neighborhoods like yours that make intentional choices about what kind of housing is built there that's appropriate for different sized family units or individuals or whatever. And I just think like, yeah, the shift in culture had to happen before the shift in infrastructure could really happen.
well,
Um,
and to link that you know, what I know of that time of the pioneering times at Earthaven and this neighborhood we keep referring to of the Hut Hamlet, what I've heard is that their commitment that they came up with together was to experiment with different building styles on the bedrooms. And so each bedroom was like to be no bigger than, and then there was some parameters of like
Right.
8 by 10. And then we're going to share a bathroom and share a kitchen.
Right.
So, and the thought was that that's where people would live when they were just moving there, and then they move out and build their homes elsewhere. And that hasn't happened. It kind of has become a downtown, and it's become the place where people are creating additions onto those little bedrooms. So,
True. I mean, there are 3-story homes with 4 bedrooms now in the hamlet that started out in like what, a 12 by 20 A-frame or something. Yeah. You know, we use what we've got. And that this speaks to someone, you know, had a question in the comments like, do we reuse and repurpose stuff? And I'm like, this whole village is cobbled together with scraps until
well,
very recently, right? And now we're like making some intentional choices because there are benefits and there are trade-offs and different types of energy and efficiency with salvaged materials and versus intentionally sourced materials. And yeah.
yeah, I think, I mean, yes, there are buildings that are built from recycled and upcycled materials. And yeah, I think Rachel is speaking to maybe the evolution of a value of time. Like people maybe were invisibilizing the cost of a building by not counting their labor early on. And that's a misnomer. That's like, again, riding on unexamined privilege or unowned privilege. And so, you know, the next generation of builders were like, no, I'm counting my time in this. That's a part of the equation to say how much this costs. Even though I'm not paying out that money, I still am not going to work elsewhere to make money. I need to count my labor in the house. So yeah, my house that I live in now we started the beginning of the pandemic. So we broke ground right before, and then we were in it. So we were like, okay, I guess we're going through with this. And my partner, is one of the electricians and builders in the village who is responsible for a lot of the shoddy natural building experiments from over the past 28 years. He has to live with those mistakes all the time. He has to like feel the pain of his friends living in conditions that people don't want to be living in anymore if they have a choice to not to. And anyway, so I have a high value on reusing things. I mean, most people do at Earthaven. I would drive to town once a week. I'd do all the purchasing and I'd go to the restore and I'd go to, which is Habitat for Humanity. And I'd go to the scrap yard and the metal yard and to all the thrift stores. And I'd find gold is what it what it felt like. And I'd find the louvered doors that someone took off of their, you know, water closet. And I was like, oh, great, we want louvered doors, which is those slats on the doors that like allow for airflow in the house. Again, not to build up mold. And oh, I brought them home and I'm so proud and I'm so excited. And I found this door and this window. And my partner, who is the builder, is like cringing. He's like, you have no idea how hard and timely it is to integrate these materials.
Yeah.
And we're like paying our friends to help us. It's not just us. We're like paying out hourly wages to people, and they're like painting them and, you know, spraying them, and the paint's peeling off of the new paint because we don't know enough to know that you can't put that kind of paint on this kind of paint, but we don't even know what this kind of paint is because we just inherited it from the restore. So it was like that. And then to like, after all this effort, put that in landfill because it was literally unworkable. And like, so it was like that. It's like painful, like in any way. And it doesn't mean it's not worth trying, but like, I definitely got humbled on being a part of a new build of best intentions and lots of money out in the realm of time spent trying to reuse and maybe save some money. And in the end, we weren't saving money. So yeah, I mean, it's not to say that the ideals aren't there, and that the practice and experiment isn't there. It's we're just trying to be honest with like when it's efficient and actually having traction and the intended outcome.
Practical and honest. Yeah, I mean, I would not want to leave anyone with the impression that we are not intensively reusing here and making conscientious choices about every part of our lives. I mean, and everyone is like on a spectrum with the choices that they're making. But I think, you walk around the village and you're not really going to see anyone wearing the latest fashion. You're going to see a bunch of quirky people just wearing whatever the hell they want. But also it's like, or, people with carefully curated capsule wardrobes of pieces that will stand the test of time, and they will wear and they will mend, and then they'll probably be gifted at a clothing swap. Like we have one almost every winter. We'll have one in a couple of weeks, and we get together and we're like, it's not working for you anymore, but it's still usable. We're just going to get together and swap it all around and take it home. But with clothes and with dishes, like we've had a free store here for many, many years. Our current free store did get destroyed during Hurricane Helene, but we are going to recreate another, and we're having a pop-up temporary free store right now, where it's like our thrift store, but it doesn't cost anything. And, and also, I mean, we'll put things in there that are maybe sub thrift store quality, because we know like kids are going in there for crafty stuff, and maybe I need rags, right? And so I need to go in there and I need to find a ratty t-shirt. But then there's also really lots of mostly amazing and wonderful things in there that have a lot of life left. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of that's part built into the ethic of our village, I think, and built into the ethic of a land-based life. And there's a phrase, and I always forget one part of it, but it's like, make it yourself, make do or do without, or something like that. I don't remember. And I mean, we're not, yeah, I think, but with something that NikiAnne was expressing is like, again, we're coming from a place of like honesty around like capacity and moderation and idealism, and those types of things. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm more moderate and less zealous about some things than I was, say, like 10 or 15 years ago in my life. Middle age has kind of done that to me. It's taken some of the sharpness out of me and has made me like make some small concessions in areas of my life that bring me that the payoff is great. Where like the ease this thing provides makes it worth, the shift. And then there are other things that I will, never move on, that are just core values. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because I like to put my energy into other major endeavors like agriculture, and so it's like to free up some life energy for this thing. Like, absolutely, I will buy a frozen pizza for dinner sometimes, you know, instead of making everything from scratch at home.
Of which she's very capable too.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the default, right? I mean, in my life.
And
And
yours.
yeah, and that's like, but it's like, oh, I mean, this click in my, like, we can see things on social media and on Instagram, and we see these homesteaders and these folks, and they're doing it all, right? They're farming and they're raising all of their own food and they're cooking it all from scratch. And, I have tried to live that life before I came to Earthaven. And I just really wonder about what is their sense of satisfaction in life. Like, how great is their sense of satisfaction? I'm not criticizing anything they're doing. It's like all like grow your own food, making everything from scratch. It's like very beautiful, and maybe many, and having kids and homeschooling them and all the things. But it drove me to an intense place of burnout. And so, but that was the only concept of land-based life I had, I think. And then moving to Earthaven and living in community, like I relaxed a whole lot. And now my life is even more connected because I have time and energy for reflection. I experience joy in the work that I'm doing. But there are like small concessions that are made to create that ease in my life so I can actually live my life. There are maybe other words I would like to have used to say that, but I'm hoping the idea is conveyed because it's even, we'll talk about this in another session, but midlife and the midlife reckoning. And again, like I'm reassessing my priorities and I'm like, do I want to spend the rest of my life working this hard? Like, yeah. Or do I want to be able to enjoy and be more in my life?
Mhm. Yeah. I'm seeing your question, Ken, about yeah, using, more manufactured materials. Is it possible to build a house that lasts longer, uses less energy, less firewood, in the long run than a building made from local materials that you have on hand? Yeah, I'd love to just tell a little bit of the stories of where I'm living right now in Gateway neighborhood, because I think it speaks to that. And yeah, it's very much on the back of my partner's learning journey of like, I mean, you might have studied with him or seen him online or see him on the YouTube channel with Earthaven, but Chris Farmer is his name, and he was in all those radical experiments early on, and like trying to make hempcrete and like build a house that was completely from wood from the land and earth and plaster, and he did it. He did that a couple times over, and he got to the place what Rachel's addressing, which is like, I only have so much life energy. How do I want to spend it? And so this is like, don't let your ideals get in the way of your ideals. And so I want to bring in another line that he says. He says, destruction is not the problem in the world. It's unconscious destruction for no lasting good. In that statement, it's saying inherently, by being humans, creating a village, we're creating destruction. By clearing a farm field, we destroyed a forest. And that's like the intensity that a lot of the people are engaging in this land-built, land-tended life at Earthaven. And it's not for the faint of heart, and it's not without grief embedded in every move of a slaughter of an animal or the felling of a tree, or running over a frog on the road with our cars as we're driving home at night. So to answer that question more specifically, yes, like that house can be built, not just at Earthaven, but anywhere. And I'm living in versions of those homes built by my partner that is that middle road, is that conscious reckoning with the relationship of time and resources and energy. And so he likes to say that, so I live in this home that we call Saluna. And maybe Debbie could put in the chat a link to this video that this amazing woman, Kirsten, just created, that highlights some of these things we're talking about in the village. And so Saluna is a duplex by floor, so it's shared housing. And he likes to say, my partner who built it, he has no way of checking this fact, but he aimed for, and he thinks he might have built the most energy efficient home in America that wasn't built by a millionaire. And so it was with a lot of manufactured store-bought goods, with intentionality to have those produce well in efficiency, to function well through time. So yes, we have sheetrock on the inside of the house. There's a lime plaster on the outside. It's 2x6 stud frame walls, blown in cellulose, which is like shredded newspaper as the insulation. Passive solar by design, huge key factor, passive solar. In the northern hemisphere we're in, it's really harvesting that southern sun in the wintertime that's coming in low through the windows when we want that heat in. It has overhangs on the house to prevent excess heat coming in the summertime when it's hot. We're not wanting direct sunlight in our house. It's got great ventilation. It's got uber good insulation, such that we have a wood stove in the house. And like we kind of don't need it. And I feel really uncomfortable saying that because that's not a lot of people's realities. Like they're burning wood for their like wellness, like for their homes to be warm enough to be living in and not getting sick. And so it is, like there are huge differences and reflections of moments in time on decisions being built. And we had the resources to build it all in one punch over 2 years and like really dial it in. And he had the skill. And there was constantly choices we made that were so painful of like how much concrete for this and how much, you know, how much building there is. I mean, because we built it and they will come kind of situation. It's like more than we need. This is after living in a 12 by 12 by 12 hut that he built for 2 years, the two of us. We're like, that's not good for any relationship. But, we were both comfortable living with smaller footprint. And I like to host. So we built a house that was a little bigger than we needed because we have like 40 people over quite often. And so, just like all kinds of choices that like relate to the social as well, as the ecological. And we do have a mini split. This is also to address that question that I also saw in the chat about mold. Yes, we have mini splits on each floor. And so that's an HVAC system that is an air conditioner, and that is absolutely tending to our mold mitigation. And so theoretically, we're not living with mold, really, hopefully. I mean, it's probably like in little ways, but that are not seemingly detrimental to health right now. But we're off the grid, so we're managing that in accordance with the sun. And we've got a generator backup, and we've got propane. So we're not off all of our addiction to fossil fuel. Like that's still in the mix, and this is the transition strategy. So it seems to like, yeah, be experimenting in different ways.
Yeah, thanks for sharing about that in detail. And I guess there's one thing in there that I kind of wanted to offer a counterpoint to, because it sounds like I was just maybe completely complaining about living in my house, but you were speaking to your house and you were speaking to the wood stove. And it's like, this is part of this interdependence conversation that we're having. And and like there are some other folks in the village that live in a co-housing complex, and they don't have wood stoves. And I've never thought much of it before, but I recently like had the recognition in myself that I refuse to live in a home that doesn't have a wood stove, and that's not my primary source of heat. Like I have such a depth of relationship and interdependence with fire and with the forest simply from heating my home, and I really love that. And I don't know what's going to happen as I get older. That feeling may completely change, and that might be one of the concessions that I make, right? Like as in my 60s or 70s, I'll be like, I am over this like wood stove management firewood thing. I just can't do it anymore, and I want something different. And I guess that's why I brought it up, is like we're all different here too, right? And we all have different priorities and the different aspects of this land-based life that we're most in love with and that we're most plugged into and that we are tending the most. And I might feel different about my wood stove if I was solely responsible for my firewood for the winter. But again, the interdependence piece and the community life and like my neighborhood, like, yeah, so we share this microgrid that NikiAnne spoke to earlier. We also share all of our firewood procurement and processing together. And we have these work parties and we get together and we make massive amounts of firewood that heats all like 12, 14, I don't know how many houses are in my neighborhood. There's like 25 people. And so enough firewood for everyone. And so like that takes a little bit of a burden off of me, like doing this as a group and doing it together, and can allow me some ease to have that enjoyment and love and gratitude and presence, like with my fire. Like I noticed for the first time, we got up to almost 40 degrees today. So my fire actually went out in my wood stove for the first time in 2 weeks. Like it's been going like at least coals, right? Like I'll have like I burn enough wood over time, and I've learned how to do this as efficiently as possible in my home and with my wood stove. And I have a lot of thermal mass. There are stones and concrete cobbed in around my wood stove, so it holds heat for a really long time. Um, but yeah, I mean, to stay warm in the straw bale house with the single pane, windows or whatever, like, yeah, I mean, there was a probably a fifth of a cord of wood burned in this last month because we've had this polar vortex situation. So again, it's like I'm exploring both my gratitude and love of it, and also the like, yep, and that was a lot of resource used to keep my house warm. Though I do have great like passive solar, like the sun definitely warms at my home on sunny days. But yeah, so choices, priorities, and there's this thing that's been coming up for me around like purity, and I think like we've been naming that as like idealism, and that naturally built or consciously built or built in a way that is kind to the earth has to look like this. And like what we've learned in 30 years of building buildings in this place is that that is not true. It does not look one way. It can look many ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
I want to just finish this piece around the fire, and then I want to see if people have questions around agriculture as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I miss having a fire.
I bet.
And just to be clear, like I can have a fire, it's just not needed. And
Right.
so and I'm not using the HVAC. So back to the passive solar design, like that, I just want like talking about sustainability. I think we mostly focus on the creation part of the timeline and not the longevity and usage. And I just really want to keep bringing in fuel as a part of our equation through time, because that's part of like the cost benefit analysis can't be just this snapshot of the 1 or 2 or 3 years that we created the building, but like how did it perform through time and how much resource into that journey. And so that's that
Yeah, that's what really
expanded
matters.
of staying in place. And
Mhm.
around it's like staying in place, like I mean, as people are picking land and picking villages and, building things and clearing farm fields or whatever you might be doing in your life or long to do, I really just invite us all to really expand our imagination so far, like maybe until we're 80 years old or 90 years old, or maybe we're an ancestor for 150 years and it's like 3 generations or 5 generations later, however many it takes to be a generation. Because this is what was part of my reckoning with moving to Earthaven in the place that it was. And I was walking through Hidden Valley with my friend Kim Chi, and I was pissed at where Earthaven chose to be. I was like, I want to ride my bike. I have to get in a car every time I go to town. This makes me so angry. I wish I was closer to Asheville. I wish that we had more transportation ease. And what I realized after, a couple bitch sessions was like, oh, this is from my vantage point right now in my 30s, in whatever that was in the 2000s. Like, is Earthaven going to be a suburb of Asheville in 80 years? Like, that's the thing that landed for me. Like, oh, I wasn't looking far enough.
Mhm.
And so I wanted what I wanted for my choice of culture and connection and comfort in this moment. And I think there's oftentimes we are building and creating from that place, which sure, like we want our needs met. We want like a good enough life, but like, can we really stretch to way far out? And that's what really excites me about living at Earthaven is I am surrounded by folks that are committed to living with less, living with heightened awareness of a future, and are willing to make compromises for their life for something beyond their own life. They're investing in something they're not going to bear the fruits of. Whoa.
Mhm.
For me, that's humbling.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And I think you're doing that, Rachel, with how you're doing agriculture. And I'm curious if we want to switch over to that topic of like tending to land and what that looks like for you.
Yeah, or what that looks like here in the village
Yeah.
too, right? Because we have a lot of collaborative situations, and I might be in the least collaborative of all the situations we have or interdependent.
Veggie
Um,
ladies.
Oh yeah, yeah, there's veggie ladies. I mean, I've got my hands in a lot of pots. It's true. Um, yeah, so yeah, one of the we have a lot of people refer to us that visit us have referred to us as an agricultural community or a farming community, which we think is really funny. Because we don't maybe recognize that as being so true, but at the same time, like it's all about perspective and spectrum, right? And that we are all like, I think one of our shared values here at Earthaven is like being in relationship with our food sources. Um, and so, I mean, to that end, we have folks raising cows here in the valley, and both dairy cows and cows for beef. And that's run right now in a cooperative model. It's been kind of like a sole ownership for the last decade, I think. Um,
But cooperative even in service to the cows, volunteers and shifts and
yeah, like I mean,
Mhm.
there are three like main people who are like clear stakeholders in the dairy now and like holding the big picture pieces. But I've been doing a milk shift at the dairy.
Mhm.
Wow, I mean, 7 years now, maybe? I just gave up my regular weekly shift this year. I now just do a monthly shift because I just wanna support the thing. I no longer have time in my life as a farmer to lend so much time to another farmer, but I still, like, can't help but, like, be a part of it, and I wanna be out there. It's some of the like, best parts of my life are, especially in the wintertime, to be out in a quiet winter night under the moon with the cows. It's the absolute best. Um, but yeah, so it's like a work trade situation, right? And people don't work trade and they just buy milk from the dairy. And so it has cash flow and it has labor flow and it has all of this, lots of investment, right? We rely on this. This is a major food source in the valley for many of us. Um, yeah, and so I think that really is like a shining example of like one of the ways that agriculture can be in community and be supported by community at different levels. And it's been like 10 years in the making, and the fine tuning, and the tweaking, and the who, and the how. Um, yeah, and then I'm part of a group called Veggie Ladies, and there are 6 of us, and we are in our 6th year, I believe. We're going into our 6th year, maybe our 7th. That doesn't make sense. I'm not sure. It's been a long time that we've been farming together and gardening together. And like the name implies, Veggie Ladies, like, we're growing vegetables together. Um, and we don't completely feed our families. I mean, because one of the other things, like in the community, we're working with a restriction of space and land, and that's part of the creativity, right? Like we are in this mountain valley, and so we have very little flat bottom land. And it really is like, I love a challenge. And it's like, okay, how do we maximize the space? But like not beyond the carrying capacity of the land, not beyond the health of the land. Like we see how that's done out there, but how to creatively use this space in balance, but like maximize its potential for supporting our lives. So yeah, and then I also, I raise animals here on the land, and this is something I kind of wanted to speak to earlier, but maybe there needs to be a break in my voice for a little while and see if any questions have arisen. But you were talking about something about the grief of living with the land, and you did mention like cutting a tree or slaughtering an animal. And I just want to really fully acknowledge that in this moment, and I'm feeling some emotion come up in me, and not totally sure what it is. It's gratitude actually. Like sometimes I
Mhm.
feel really overwhelmed by gratitude. Um, and that I have had the opportunity actually to walk in this life and to know that it takes life to support life in many different ways, even when you're just growing vegetables. Uh, but the honor, the grief, um, the gratitude that I feel in like raising animals for food, and having that relationship in taking their lives. And I've been walking towards that for much of my life, and it's like fully actualized now. But I just want to acknowledge that there's also a big piece of our culture here, and it's a big piece of land-based life. And we have people on all diet from all spectrums of dietary preferences and how they live. But one thing that we do is we live in support and tolerance of each other's
Mhm.
choices, right? And tolerance isn't even like strong enough a word that implies that we're putting up with something, and that's not what I mean. I'm happy for you to make the choices that are right for you, and thank you for being happy that I make the choices that are right for me. Um, because food is also a spiritual thing. It's like it's a cultural thing, you know, and I think that is like kind of how I came to farming. I mean, I started out in my youth, there was gardening and farming happening around me, and it's always been a thread in my life, but it's a part of my spiritual practice. You know, we find the form of a spiritual practice in different things, we humans do, and that's the form that mine takes that is then filled and with attunement to the universe, my sense of belonging, also personal growth. And I don't know how many times I'm like, take it to the garden, Rachel. And like that mind, you know, that's like thrashing around. And I can take it there and work it out like through my body but and my mind and come to a place of like peacefulness, or like let the tears flow if that's what needs to happen, or like not doing something, failing, and like having to deal with my sense of failure. And like I mean there's an abundant amount of opportunities for growth and connection. They're just infinite. And I think that's why I just keep getting drawn deeper in.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm.
I was
I
just meandering there. I was just, oh, yeah.
feel
We're
your
talking about
joy.
something I love.
I'm feeling your joy for your life. Yeah. And
Mm,
you know, you mentioned this, you described this, and I just want to like spell out something that feels common for how I hear people approaching the village from like from the whatever worlds they're coming from. A question that will often get asked is, how self-sufficient are you, or
mm,
how long until you're self-sufficient? And I mean, it's a fair question, and I get why people are orienting um, to that question, but the answer very easily is we're not orienting towards self-sufficiency. We're really orienting towards interdependency in a bioregional way. And so, you know, we are collaborating and sharing resources and food from our own land of Earthaven, and also with neighbors in the valley, and also neighbors from beyond the valley in the local region.
mhm,
And that is what we feel like is our lifeline to security and resilience, particularly as we increasingly get into hard times. And so that feels huge to name here. And then coupled with that is, I don't think, for me, my experience is that I don't experience Earthaven as very dogmatic.
mm,
Another way to say that, I don't experience Earthaveners to be very dogmatic either.
mhm.
There's
Right.
two things there, right? There's that thing that's this
Mhm,
entity that we all feed that's bigger than ourselves. But Earthaven is also not made up of anything other than ourselves and whatever our intentions were. And there has historically been some, what I would call like environmental fundamentalism around what is sustainable and what is permaculture. And it caused so much pain that that's actually one of the lessons that we are not repeating. I have not seen it repeated yet, is getting into um, environmental fundamentalism and doing a lot of shoulding and blaming and projecting. Not to say we don't still judge each other or like have our like moments of smallness and threat or whatever, but like it doesn't get played out on the public forum very much anymore, which is so amazing. Like that is a huge, huge, huge success to have come to that place and be practicing adversities, having adversities and reaching across adversities in a mature way. So may it be so that we continue in that way. And
Yeah.
that's why our membership process is so tight, just to say, to link it to that. is because we're in protection of that thing.
Oh, of this culture that we're building here. Yeah, this culture that values diversity of thought and being without being dogmatic and exclusive. Yeah, absolutely. There, yeah, the self-sufficiency piece, like it's very popular right now to be self-sufficient. And I think of that as actually being very fragile, right? Being independent is being very fragile and not very resilient. I think the way that I would explain that is like, I think about a homestead, like I mentioned earlier, my burnout, that's an example of that fragility. We were a nuclear family and like farming and gardening and trying to make the foods from scratch and homeschool the kids. And, but it can go further than that, like on the individual or family unit level of like, you get really ill or break a leg, like it doesn't matter what wonderful systems you've set up or how many animals you have or how much food is out there. Like, what are you going to do with that? I mean, how are you going to deal with that? Right. And like here in community, it's like there's redundancy of humans, but also acknowledging this interdependence and not trying to isolate ourselves by being self-sufficient or independent. And you did a good job of talking about the sort of layers of interdependence. Like we have there's a heavy flow of resources between the farm right next door to us and us. And then like, as we go further and further out, we have different relationships with the farms and things in our area. But I also do think about like, yeah, it's also part of what I consider in farming personally and how I tend the land here and what I choose to do with it. What happens if we can't go to the grocery store? Right. And I think about that and I think about wanting to be able to feed my people. And like I can't do that by myself. That's a collaborative community effort, right? And so that is why the networking among farmers, like the interdependence there, creating a web of resiliency, making sure that we are complementing each other in what we're doing, making good choices for the valley. Yeah, because what if we were limited to our bioregion? And so the farm next door and the farm that's like maybe 5 miles down the road from us that way and maybe 15 that way. But yeah, so it's also a consideration, but it's not independence. It's not about self-sufficiency. It's about creating a web of community that is outside the borders of this community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love it. Just got entered in the chat that, just to acknowledge that so many people are embracing interdependence, bioregionalism, localism, in recognition that those ties have deep value and going it alone is far less resilient. Yep. So glad that that's
Love it.
reality. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. And I saw that question also of how did we make that shift to relating to each other differently when we were in that strife of the environmental fundamentalism and moving out of it. And, there's many ways to answer that. And I can't pretend to scratch the surface of all the ways in which we moved out of that, but things that are in my memory are one was getting bruised enough people getting bruised enough from all angles. It was like, ouch, let's not do that anymore, was part of it. Some people left. Some people were asked not to come to council because of how they were conducting themselves. And I think that with the best intentions of the skills we were learning, we were still coming with our baggage. And so it was like the gap between where we're wanting to be with our skills, communication and conflict mediation, and where we have, when we're triggered and we're in that regressed place, what we're bringing up and communicating from that place. So there was the gap. But I will say one of the biggest tension relievers was changing our governance system. So at that time, we were operating with 100% consensus decision-making model. And even though we were only to make principled blocks and not personal blocks, who's the judge of that? I think I'm coming from a principled place. This is all at a principle and everyone, so it's still so much wiggle room or so much room for discretion and subjectiveness in that. So using that model, using the 100% decision-making model, we actually voted to approve a shift in the model, which was to consensus -2. That still didn't clear up enough of the safety, like enough of the, if someone was like, I don't believe that we should be using tractors, that's not permaculture, down with fossil fuels. And someone's like, I'm not interested in tilling a 4-acre field with a pitchfork, So like that kind of ideals, fundamentalist ways coming against each other, like that was because everyone had a say in everyone's business when it came to the land on the commons. And so to change our zones of jurisdiction was part of it. So some of the, like one, we just got to be like, oh, this is this farm field over here that you don't have a say in. Glad to hear your opinion. Good to know. You don't have a say in how I'm doing it. So that got cleared up. But to go back to this, like where we are now and how we got there is in that place of not feeling safe or excited to bring proposals to council anymore, particularly around agriculture, because it was so conflict ridden. We went to another stage, did another proposal to take it to where we are now, which is a supermajority vote with a consensus decision, like based in consensus. So we strive towards consensus, but we have a fallback to a supermajority vote. And so that created enough cleaning of the slate and building trust and helping us feel like we weren't going to get blocked by a tyranny of the minority, let's say, that morale started getting boosted again. And my primal triggers weren't getting triggered. I weren't being threatened because you as an individual can't stop me with this thing, because we're in a more of a collective, like weighted decision-making process that wasn't so either or. So that's part of that answer, I would say.
And I want to say, like, just taking the pressure off by shifting to that model was almost enough, in the way that we rarely have to rely on the fail-safe, and we are still pretty much operating on consensus in this community that 98% of the time we reach consensus in our decision making.
Yeah.
Allowing moderating, adapting, allowing yourself options and a little bit of ease is really magical.
Yeah. Well, I want to say thank you so much for your time, everyone. And I'm not seeing any questions sitting there unanswered. I hope I didn't miss any. So just want to acknowledge that we have 2 more calls together under this umbrella of interdependence. The next one is on midlife, discernment, and sacred sorting. And the final one will be on cultivating the community mind. Hope you can join us for those if those are interesting topics to you. And also just to say that, you can come to Earthaven anytime. We have tours operating in person almost twice a month. And you can also do a customized tour if the Saturday tour doesn't work for you. There's a virtual tour coming up on February 13th. If you or anyone want to join that and kind of just like hear a different version of the story. I mean, this is well over a 30-year story, so it's not just a simple telling or a short telling. So just keep taking in the story and the orientation and relationship to the experiment as you feel called. And just thank you so much for your time. And it really feels great to get to know you through your questions and your comments. So please, feel free to be sending those over email or give us a call on the outreach line through Earthaven, or engage us on social media, which is usually Rachel holding that down.